Hi, my name is Dan Narber. I'm a project manager with the Iowa Economic Development Authority, and I'm going to be going over some requirements for the federal labor standards requirements for the Community Development Block Grant Program and as they apply to your projects. This training session will be related to the enforcement and compliance components of the labor standards training. The previous session that I have done was more for the statutes that make up the labor standards, the applicability of the labor standards to your program, and also the requirements and responsibilities that you have to make Davis-Bacon work for your project. So again, we'll be discussing the enforcement and compliance issues as it relates to the program. To help with enforcement and compliance, there are several posters and things that have to be made available and posted at the job site so that contractors, they're aware that it's a federal project that requires certain federal guidelines and federal programs to be a part of their project. And it also is those posters are there for the employees working on the job to know that it is a federally funded project and covered by certain federal regulations and that they have certain rights because of that. So the first poster is the Davis-Bacon poster that basically explains employee rights as it relates to a Davis-Bacon project. These posters are available in English and Spanish versions. I usually send these out in PDF form when I send out the approval of the wage determinations. So you would get copies that way. They're also available on the DOL website that you can access those there and print them off as well. The sign should be posted so that everyone can see it, at the job site, wherever most of the employees have access to, in a visible area, out of the weather, so that they, again, have the ability to see that, and it's not something that's hidden. It has to be in a conspicuous place that people, employees would have access to. This is the employee rights poster. The requirements are all listed there. How it applies, to the prevailing rates, overtime, enforcement of those things. Section related to apprentices. The box at the very bottom of that, you can include either your name as the local labor compliance officer, or you can put my name and contact information in there as well, just so that an employee has someone they can contact if they do have questions or concerns related to what's going on with the project, either with payment or classifications or anything like that. Other DOL required posters are the Equal Employment Opportunity poster, the Fair Labor Standards Act posters, the OSHA requirements, job safety posters should also be posted on the site, on the job board. The DOL website, there at that address, www.dol.gov, provides a link to all the posters that are available for downloading. So you can get those there. We also have copies in the labor packet that I make available at the time I approve wage determinations. And I believe they're also available through our management guide on our website with links in that as well to those posters. Another piece of information that's required to be posted at the job site is the project wage decision. The wage determination that's issued for the project, for the work that's going on, must be posted so that employees know what classification they're working, or based on the classification that they're listed, they can tell what the rate of pay is, for that classification of work. Along with that, you should also post any Department of Labor conformance letters that may come out based on requests for additional classifications. When those come back out from DOL, I'll forward those out to you, and those should be posted along with the wage determination, so that employees who may be classified in that new added classification know what their rate of pay is that has been set by the Department of Labor. Part of your enforcement activities will include the following: payroll and document review. You'll be checking everything for accuracy as far as the payroll report, making sure that the calculations add up with the deductions and things that they may list, that their hours and things match up, overtime hours, standard hours. So just a general check for accuracy on everything. One of the important parts of the payroll, the certification piece, is that you want to make sure that there's an authorization letter to have someone else sign the payroll report if it's not being signed by the owner or an officer of the company. Employee interviews. Again, this is part of the enforcement process, checking to make sure that employee interviews match up with the payroll reports that have been submitted. You'll want to make sure that you're getting out to do employee interviews frequent enough. It may require more than one visit to the site, but to get a good cross-section of the employee classifications for the work that's being done. We just don't want to see a bunch of employee interviews that are all for laborers or all for carpenters. We want to, obviously, if that's the only work that's going on, that may be all that you can get at that time. But then again, it may require you go out another day to get interviews from other contractors or subcontractors that may be on site using other classifications than those that you already have. The enforcement process, again, also includes those additional classification and conformances. Once those are received from the Department of Labor, their response to what's been submitted, those will need to be forwarded out to the contractor and subcontractor so that they are aware of what needs to be paid and what DOL has set as the conformance rate for that classification. So that will need to be sent out to them, and then also posted with the wage determination, as I mentioned earlier, at the project site, because those classifications are not on the original wage determination. So any employee who may be classified as the new classification that's been added, they would then have access to that information and be able to see what their rate of pay should be for the work they're doing. You'll also need to establish an enforceable procedure and process to kind of get you through the labor compliance part of your project. And it's just good to let the contractors know what their responsibilities are, what you plan to do, what your responsibilities are, and what things that you have to do in order to document compliance, just so that everybody knows, what's going on and everybody's on the same page. That can include informing the contractor that you will be out to do employee interviews. They're required by law under the federal labor regulations to allow you on site to conduct those interviews, and so it's good to let them know that up front, so that if you show up, they're not taken off guard, and they know that you'll be coming out at some point. You're not required to let them know exactly when you'll be there, but just to let them know that it is part of the process. Through the process, if you notice any violations or problems, you'll want to be sure to identify those and document what they are, so that we can work through those and get those corrected. And again, just keeping track of things so that we have a way of going back and verifying what's been done and making sure that we get through that and to a point of compliance by the contractor or subcontractor. If there are problems or violations, unless it's something minor that you can just contact them through email and kind of work through things, that's fine. But if there are some major problems and things that they maybe haven't gotten to you after numerous attempts to get information, then at that point it might be necessary to write a letter stating, here's the things that need to be taken care of. You're not in compliance with these items, and then set a date for completion of those so that they have say 30 days to make restitution or to achieve compliance. And then basically after that, if they still refuse, then we have a way of getting to a point where we could further or refer that on to HUD or the Department of Labor for further investigation. You'll also be responsible as part of the enforcement to investigate and resolve complaints. If an employee has an issue or contacts you about underpayment or misclassification, or that they think they should be paid something different, those are the kinds of things that we'll have to work through, and depending on the how severe it is or how detailed or in-depth it is, if it's something that's easily resolved, you certainly can do that, and again document the files with everything. But I am available as well for any questions that you might have to help through that process. All right, the next couple of slides are just a copy of the payroll report. This is the kind of the key point or part of the whole compliance and enforcement part of Davis-Bacon, after construction has started. And so I'm just going to walk through different parts of the payroll report. And I guess, again, a lot of you are probably familiar with this report, but just wanted to go through that, touch on some of the things that, just to make sure that these things are getting filled out properly. One thing I would note, this is the standard DOL payroll report that most contractors will use. They are not required to use this form as long as it provides what they do have, as long as it provides the same information, that's acceptable as well. So if they have a payroll reporting system or software that gives this same information, that would be acceptable. However, the certification, the back page, which is the slide after this, that does have to accompany whatever payroll report they submit. They do have to have that certification form along with it, but the actual form itself can be something else other than this form, as long as it provides the same information. All right, so payroll numbering, obviously you start with payroll number 1 and work your way through based on however many weeks they're working. The last payroll should be marked as final. The payrolls should be sequential, and they don't need to submit payroll reports for non-work weeks. So if they have a month or two off because of weather, that they're not doing anything, and they end on payroll 4, the next payroll that they start up again can be payroll number 5. They again don't have to provide non-work payrolls during that time that they're not working, just as long as everything is sequential. The next area is the week ending, the payroll reporting period. This is just something that keeps track of when they're on the site for that week, and use that to tie in with your employee interviews when you do those, so that the date that you go out to do the employee interview, you can pull the payroll report, for that same time period to make sure that things match up. In self-explanatory, just a project and location, making sure that this is the payroll report for the project that you're actually involved with, and that it's not, a form or payroll report for another project that the contractor may be working on. The main points of the payroll form or the payroll report are these next 8-9 columns. This is where all the detail is. The first column is the name of the individual and their an identification number for them. It can be the last 4 digits of their Social Security number. They do not have to provide their full Social Security number on the payroll report. So they can use an identification number that's unique to their payroll reporting system, or again, if it's the last 4 digits of their social, that's fine as well. The next column, number 3 here, is the actual work classification for that individual. If they're working as a laborer and there are several different groups, A, B, C, D, for a labor classification on the wage determination, they'll want to make sure the contractor is listing that group letter as well. And so it should say labor group A, so that when you're checking the rate of pay and calculating, that you know exactly what they should be paid, and you don't have to guess what labor classification group letter that they're using. This next column just is for reporting the hours for each day. Right up above that, you'll have where the actual days are listed, but the hours for each day are then provided in each of these boxes. It's important for this section to point out that the standard straight time hours are on the bottom half of that. The overtime hours are listed in the top row. And so just as a reminder, the contractor sometimes will flip-flop those and just start putting regular hours in the overtime column or an overtime row. And it just, it confuses things. Just because you've got all these overtime hours listed that way and they've certified the report as being correct. So then potentially it could be an issue if HUD or DOL were to look at that and say, well, you've got all this overtime, how come these hours weren't paid at that rate? So just a simple thing to point out, make sure contractors are filling these out correctly, putting straight time hours in that bottom half of this column or row. Next. The next 2 columns, basically just total hours that they've worked based on what they've reported on each day and the rate of pay that employee is being paid at. So whatever the wage determination states, that rate of pay should be listed there at a minimum. It can be higher if the contractor's already paying an individual more, that's certainly fine, but that's where the rate of pay will be. Then the next column will be the gross amount earned. The top half or left top corner of that box is where the hours or the gross amount for the hours worked on the project will be listed. The bottom half of that is then the total hour or total gross amount for the entire week. So an employee may only work 10 hours or something on this project. That gross amount would be listed in that top half. And then if they've worked on other projects for the contractor, their total amount for that week would be what's included down in the bottom half. And that total amount obviously is going to be used in calculating their withholdings and deductions and things like that. So it's important to have that information. And so the next column then does list the deductions. This is where they'll include what they're taking out for Social Security, any state, federal withholding tax, those kinds of things. The column that we're most concerned about is the other column, so that if they do have deductions listed there, we want to make sure that there's supporting documentation to show what those deductions are and that the employee has actually signed off on that or has provided an authorization showing that they understand what that is and how much is coming out of their weekly pay. Then, of course, the total deductions in that last column of the Section 8, and then the total wages paid for the week based on their gross amount minus the deductions. All right, this is the back side of the certification form part of the payroll report. And as I stated earlier, this is the form that needs to accompany every payroll report, whether it's the previous report that we just looked at, or if it's something similar the contractor has through another payroll system. But they do have to provide this certification sign off as a part of that. Form is pretty self-explanatory. The top section, just the name of the person and title of the person completing the form. The next part of that is just that they're stating that they're responsible for completing the payroll report for the period that they've worked on the job, and that really is all that middle section is relates to. The point, or the part I wanted to point out on this side is down at the bottom when it comes to fringe benefits, where they're paid in to approve programs or plans. If the contractor is providing insurance or pensions or other things that are third-party approved plans, they would check this box for the fringe benefit payments. The top of the next column there, they can pay those in fringe benefits in cash. If they don't have other fringe benefits that they offer, then that amount for fringe benefits has to be paid in cash and made part of the employee's cash wage. And in that case, they would check this box here. Sometimes they could be paying both. They may have some fringe benefits that they offer that may only total half of what the required amount is, and then they can pay the remaining part in cash. And so in that case, they would check both of those. But a lot of times we see these come in without either box checked at all. So the next section is just for any exceptions to how fringe benefits are being paid. And so any exceptions to that are listed in this box C. The next area is the name and title of the individual signing the payroll report. This can be generally is an owner or an officer of the company, and so their name and title is listed there. If it's not, or if it's a payroll clerk or office manager or accounting person, that is acceptable too. But if it is one of those individuals who is not an officer of the company or the owner, there would have to be a signed letter of authorization from the company that gives that person permission to sign the payroll report, because underneath that box, you'll note that any falsification of the report is subject to prosecution under that section of the United States Code. And so the owner of the company, will want to make sure that the person who is signing is providing correct information. And so that's why we don't want just anybody signing these without having that authorization and oversight from the owners or officers of the company. And then the next box is the actual signature block itself, and that has to be signed, and it has to be original signature. Any of the payroll reports that come in must be original signed documents, and so you want to make sure that when those come in, they do have the original signature on them. I just threw this slide in just to remind you that when you're looking at the wages, the rates paid on the wage determination, that you actually get or looking at the correct wage decision. Sorry, that the if it is a heavy water sewer treatment plant project, that you're looking, have that correct wage determination and that the rates compare with that. Same with the heavy highway decision and the building decision, which generally comes into play with the downtown revitalization projects or other community facility projects may have where you're actually building child cares or something like that. But again, just to make sure that you've got the correct wage determination for that. So when you are looking at the payroll reports as part of the enforcement compliance, certain things can throw up some red flags, and I've just listed a few of these items here to give you an idea of if you see these things that maybe something you should either check with me or you can contact the contractor to find out for sure what's going on and to get clarification on some things. But if you see some misclassifications, maybe they just list someone as an apprentice with no other information. It's definitely a red flag, especially if they're paying the rate lower than what the prevailing rate is on the wage determination. Definitely an issue that needs to be looked into. Laborers versus skilled workers. Depending on what type of work's going on, if it's a lot of cement work, concrete finisher type work, or if you've got a contract for plumbers to do a lot of plumbing work, you want to see a payroll report come in that's got more plumbers than laborers or concrete masons because those are specialized skills and work that they're doing, and generally you aren't going to have a lot of laborers on the site doing that type of work. So if you see something like that where you may have only one skilled laborer and a whole bunch of laborers, or a skilled person on there, you and see a bunch of laborers listed after that, that's a red flag to check with the contractor and say, well, this is the kind of work you're doing. Why do you have so many laborers and only one person who's in the skilled trade? And so that or contracts that or payroll reports that may come in from some contractors that list all laborers. Based on the work they're doing, generally there's got to be something that requires some skilled trade to be on that wage or on that payroll report. So just another thing to look for. Payroll reports that don't have enough employees listed, and based on the type of work that's being done, the contract. I mean, if you know that it's going to take more than 2 people to build a treatment plant, and that's all you ever see on the wage determination or on the payroll report, then that's would just indicate that an employer is only paying a couple of people what they should, and everybody else is just out there working and not being reported. Ghost employees, those are employees that may show up when you're out doing employee interviews and they're on site doing work, but when the payroll reports come in for that week, they are not listed on the payroll report. So another red flag that would need to be looked into. Payroll reports that show individuals with the same hour, same rate of pay, same gross, same net, just everything that when it looks too good and everything's exactly the same, those are just some things that may not necessarily mean there's a problem, but it's just something to look at and make sure that we check to ensure that everybody's being paid properly. Non-allowable deductions. Sometimes there may be some things on the payroll report listed as a deduction that aren't allowed. And so if you see something listed on there that looks questionable, you can always give me a call because we can check through the labor information and resources we have through DOL and HUD for that. And if it's not there, we can always make a contact with our HUD Labor Relations Office to get more information and find out if something would be considered as an unallowable deduction. If there are other deductions listed, as I mentioned, we do have to have that authorization. And so if you see deductions listed for a lot of employees, but no other information related to that, the contractor hasn't provided you, it's certainly a red flag, something to follow up with to make sure that they are providing that information to you. If there are underpayments or problems with pay, then this restitution will be owed to those employees, and as part of the enforcement and compliance, we'll be responsible for making sure that restitution is paid and that it's done in a timely manner. They can't wait till the end of the project and then decide to pay the contract or the employee whatever's owed. Some employees may leave during the course of the project, and then trying to track them down and pay them. They still are required to pay them even if the employees left employment. And so it's why it's good to make sure that they're paid right away when those things are caught, to make sure that there isn't more of a problem down the road trying to track employees down if they no longer work there. Another part of the enforcement is possibly pursuing debarment if it's necessary. There's a contractor or subcontractor who is being willfully non-compliant, and after several attempts to get compliance with the regulations, and they still have not done that, that's the point where we may need to refer the contractor to HUD for debarment and other restrictions, or possibly even to the Department of Labor for them to come in and do an investigation to verify what's going on, and if need be, place the contractor on the debarred list from working on any federally funded projects. All right, with the wage restitution, just to kind of briefly go through that, the process for documenting wage restitution and being able to report that can be completed in the Iowa grant system. There's a form, wage restitution form in Iowa grants that you will access, fill out, and then submit. The next slide, I think, shows a screenshot of that, but the key points on the form when you're filling that out are the number of employees, and you'll be filling this out per employer. So, the one form for the per employer or contractor, but the total number of employees that are affected. We're not filling out an individual form for each employee. It's just based on the total. Then the total amount of straight time wages collected or dispersed, and then the total amount of overtime wages collected or dispersed. And so gather that information based on the certified payroll report, restitution report that they submit, and you can also upload that certified restitution report in form in Iowa grants as supporting documentation to show that we've got a signed payroll report showing the payment of those wages. So as I mentioned, here is the form. When you get into Iowa grants to complete that, you'll be filling it out again for the employer, or so whoever the contractor is. The project number is a drop-down box just based on the activity that's being done for the type of or the project, whether it's a water improvement project or sanitary sewer system improvements. You'll just select that from that drop-down box. The next four boxes generally are going to be no. Those are drop-down, yes, no as well. And like I said, usually, and I haven't ever had a case come up where we've actually referred them on to HUD for an investigation or hearing, or referred them on to the Department of labor for an investigation or hearing. And so you can go ahead and mark those as no. And then the items I mentioned previously are the number of workers that for whom the wage restitution was collected, for the total number for this employer, the total amount of the wages, straight time wages that were collected, and then the total amount of overtime wages collected. The last box, sometimes I see that filled out. It says total amount of wages. It isn't the total of those two items prior to that. That liquidated damages amount is actually what can be assessed to the contractor if they are willfully or have not paid overtime to an employee because they just didn't. And so that's where that amount of liquidated damages would come into play based on the $25 per employee per violation per occurrence, or per day per employee. So most of the time, again, that's going to be zero. Most of the overtime restitution that's collected is as a result of someone being classified and paid overtime, based on that rate, and possibly it, being set the wage rate set for a higher amount based on an additional classification request submitted to DOL, and so a lot of times it's just making up that difference. It's not like the contractor wasn't paying overtime; they just had to go back and make up that difference based on the new conformance rate. Okay, that kind of walks through the payroll reporting part of the enforcement and compliance. And again, that's kind of the biggest part of what you'll do once the project's underway. I mean, that's really the bulk of what has to be done is checking payroll reports and verifying those against employee interviews. And so, it seems like a big process and can be, but, as far as what's necessary, what the contractor has to provide really is, pretty straightforward with the payroll report and then any other documentation related to other deductions or an authorization letter for signing the payroll report. So I guess if you have any questions about any of that, you can always give me a call, and we can talk through things. You can always contact your project manager as well, but I'm certainly available for any questions you might have. So as I move forward, these next few slides or the rest of the presentation will kind of go over some of the questions and concerns that come up during the process of enforcement and compliance. Some of the problem areas that we see as project managers when we're monitoring just over the years have seen things that have come up and occur occasionally, and just wanted to go over some of those things that to make you aware of that in case it does come up in your administrative duties. So one of the biggest questions we get a lot of time from contractors, when they see the wage determination, is why are the rates so high? And I guess the main reason for that, if they're higher than what they normally pay, what they think to be, area practice or prevailing rates for that area, it's generally because DOL has not received enough survey information back, because they base those wage determinations and rates on information from surveys that have been sent out to contractors in that area. And so if they don't get enough responses back, or the responses they get back are from, bigger contractors, and, it meets their threshold for what they need, those become set as the prevailing rates. And so I guess the only thing I can say is that if contractors ask that question and they know that DOL sends out surveys, it's important to let them know that they need to complete that information and send it back, so that that's taken into consideration when DOL is setting those rates on the wage determination. Can a contractor appeal a Department of Labor approved rate? Yes, they can. If they set a rate that's higher than what the contractor wants to pay or has proposed to pay, there is a means by which they can appeal that. And the guidance for that is at the end of the wage determination, where they gather all the information they need, and then that goes directly to the Department of Labor. We can work with you and with the contractor, to help, gather that information. They can get everything they need together and forward it on to us, and we can, and in turn, send that on to DOL for their review. But the information that they need to get, it's going to be on the contractor to come up with the documentation necessary to support their case, why they feel that the rate should be lower, or what that rate should be. And so they'll have to gather all that information based on, contracts that have been let for similar projects, and what other contractors are paying employees, and all the information they can gather, to support their case. And then again, we'll send that on to DOL for review, and then ultimately it's their decision to decide whether or not to change that rate that they've already set. Why are major crafts and trades missing from the wage determination? Again, it kind of goes back to that first question about the surveys the contractors get. If they don't fill those out and send them back, DOL will not add crafts or trades to a decision, or if they don't get enough response back to meet the thresholds that they have set, or parameters for establishing rates, then they won't be added to the wage decision. So again, it's important that the contractors are filling those surveys out when they're being sent out by the DOL. How can a contractor estimate the labor costs when the trade or craft is not listed on the wage decision? The best answer we can give is that knowing how DOL adds classifications, and that the rates that they set have to bear a reasonable relationship to the other skilled trades on the decision, the contractor is going to have to estimate, labor costs that fall in that range of the other skilled trades on the decision, to ensure that they're putting together a competitive bid. They don't want to use rates that are substantially lower than the rates that are on the decision, and then, end up getting the bid and then have to come back and pay higher rates, because they will be required to pay higher rates if DOL sets those through that additional classification process. So really, it's just a matter of looking at the rates that are on there and basing, an estimate for hour or labor costs on those rates, or a range of what's on there already. And then next question, I think is just a duplicate. I'm not sure why that's on there. So we'll skip over that and go to the next one on why does DOL restrict when to submit conformance requests for additional classifications? Basically, that's the way it is in the labor regulations. The way it's stated is that when an additional classification is requested, it has to come from the contractor or subcontractor who has been awarded a contract. It can't be done before that. Can't be done during the bid process or anything else. The regs state that it's the contractor awarded the contract who then submits that information to add that classification and rate. All right. These next few items or things we'll be talking about are just, again, things that we've noticed or I've seen as part of the labor compliance process as we're monitoring or get question calls about. And so I just wanted to touch on these things a little bit to give you information in case you do run into these things. You'll have some background on what to look for, how to handle those. But you can always give me a call too anytime to go through some of this stuff and get some answer some questions if you have them. So self-employed owners is something that comes up every once in a while. If you get an owner, a subcontractor who's working by themselves on a project, they're the only one doing the work, and how is that handled? They are entitled, even though they're the owner of their own company, they're entitled to make at a minimum what that prevailing rate is for the classification of work they're doing. And so based on a contract or subcontract that they may have with the contractor, based on their total amount of the contract and their estimated hours for completion, you should be able to calculate, that their hourly rate will be X, and that at a minimum should meet what's on the wage determination for that classification of work. And if not, they're entitled to be paid that higher rate if it is higher. So it's important to make sure that they understand that and that they are entitled to that prevailing rate for that work. Also, with self-employed owners, you get the question of, how do things get reported on the payroll reports? There's a HUD Office of Labor Relations letter, LR 9601, that discusses self-employed owners, subcontractors. There are usually two different scenarios, either owners working by themselves with no one else on the site with them, or owners working with their crews. So they're out there doing work as well with the other employees. So the first case, owners working by themselves, if they are by themselves, they cannot certify their own payroll report. And that's stated in this labor relations letter. But by the labor regulations, they are not allowed or cannot certify their own pay. And because of that, they would then have to be carried on the responsible employer's weekly payroll report. So the general contractor who's hired them would then have to carry that individual on the payroll report that they submit, basically just listing them, not carrying them as an employee and having to provide them all the benefits and everything else. They just have to be listed on that payroll report and certified by the general contractor to certify that the individual is being paid a prevailing rate that they're entitled to. And so on that payroll report, like any other employee, they're going to have to be listed with their name, work classification, the actual hours of work, their effective hourly rate of pay, and then their amount paid. And so that information has to be included for those individuals who are self-employed owners, and the general contractor will then carry them on that payroll report and certify that information is correct. Self-employed owners working with their crew. It's a little different. And basically, if they are working with a crew, they're able to certify the wages of the employees they have, but they're also then able to certify, themselves. I mean, they can be the certifying person on the payroll report. And so the only difference, I guess, with this in this situation is that they, as an owner, they would list their name in the classification. They would say, whatever classification they are, electrician, owner, and then their daily and total hours worked. And that's all that's required for them on that payroll report as an owner. They don't need to list their rate of pay or how much they earned for that week. Just the name, work classification, and the daily and total hours. Any other individual or employee of that contractor, of that owner, that's listed on the payroll report has to have all of the required information related, to the hours, the rate, the amount earned, everything. But the owner themselves would not have to include all of that information. All right, another area that we see some issues with, or that I've had calls about, is in regard to apprentices. If you see a payroll report come in with a person classified as an apprentice being paid lower than the pay that's listed on the wage determination, that's something that you'll need to follow up on to make sure they are in an approved program. Only individuals who are in an approved, DOL approved apprenticeship program can be listed as an apprentice and paid at a lower rate, based on the program guidelines, that they are operating under. But and the contractor can't just list someone as apprentice because they're learning the job and they, started 2 weeks ago and they're learning as they go. That's not considered an apprentice. And, if they're paying them less than what the journeyman's rate is for that classification, they will be required to make restitution and pay them at that full amount for that classification. When you have apprentices, you'll be getting information from the contractor related to, the Bureau of Apprenticeship and Training certificate that shows that the contractor or that the employee is in a program, the date they started, when they should finish, how many hours they should work, based on the level of the apprenticeship program. And then there's usually a percentage based on that level. Say that they're level 5 or 2 of 5, they, based on their program they're in, they can be paid at a percentage of the journeyman rate, say maybe 30% or 40%, whatever it is. And so that information should be available and provided on that form as well. So you'll get that information. If you see apprentices, those are the things you want to ask for. And along with that, on that form, you just want to make sure that the worker's end date is before the start of his work on the prevailing wage project. Or I'm sorry, the first one, one worker's beginning date is after the start of his work on the prevailing wage project. So basically that means that, if they've been paying him a lower rate and he starts in the actual program on a later date than the work actually started, all of that previous work has to be paid at the journeyman's rate. They cannot pay him a lower rate until he's actually in the certified program. Same with the next one, the worker's ending date before the start of his work on the prevailing wage project. He could have made it all the way through the apprenticeship program and now he's starting to work on the project. Just want to make sure that he is being paid the journeyman's rate at that point, that they not still paying him, a percentage or a lower rate because he's completed the program. If there's more than one apprentice listed, and for some reason you only have information, or they can only provide information for one apprentice, the other individual would be considered journeyman rate and would have to be paid at that higher rate. So those individuals who might be in an apprenticeship program, or if a contractor is providing information that shows that they're an apprentice on the payroll report, the following information is provided so that you can ask the contractor for that. And they're required, to give you this information so that you're able to document the program requirements and ensure that that individual is being paid properly. as I mentioned earlier, the individual registration, Bureau of Apprenticeship and Training form is something that the contractor would have that, lists the individual, the program that they're in, the start date, end date, the level of hours, for the work that they're doing, how long they've been in the program, and the percentage of the journeyman's rate that they should be paid based on that. And so that form should be available for each individual who's registered in the program. The contractor would also need to provide relevant pages from the DOL approved program. They don't have to give you the whole document. I mean, it's probably not something you want, everything related to that, but these pages would be things that you would need in order, again, to document the compliance. The title page, which shows the name of the program, the page reflecting the ratio of apprentices to journeymen, because that is important to note. If they're listing 2 or 3 apprentices and only 1 journeyman on the payroll report, the program requirement may say, have a 1-to-1 ratio. And if that's the case, then there's an issue, and those other individuals would have to be paid a journeyman's rate because the program only allows 1-to-1 ratio. So sometimes it could be more than that. It could be 2-to-1. But again, those things would be spelled out in the program document, and that's why it's important to get that information so we can ensure that that the individuals are being paid properly. They should also include the page reflecting the pay scale for the apprentices. And as we discussed, this would include the apprenticeship level and percentage of the journeyman's rate for each of those levels, depending on the number of hours that they've worked. Their percentage of the journeyman's rate will increase over time. They also should have a page in the document that reflects fringe benefits and how those are paid. Sometimes programs will spell out that fringe benefits are paid, at a comparable percentage of what their base rate is paid of the journeyman. When they're looking at that percentage of the journeyman's rate, they can sometimes will use that same percentage of the fringe benefits to pay to that individual. But a lot of times that's not the case. They usually pay benefits in full. If they do mention a different way of paying those, that's fine, as long as it's spelled out in the program. However, if nothing is discussed or it's silent on fringe benefits, they must pay the full amount of the fringe benefit that's stated on the wage decision. So it's important to make sure we have that information because they would be required to pay that full amount if they have no other information in their program documents that talks about that. And then the signatory page, just to show that everyone has signed off and is in agreement with the program guidelines, just again to show that there is agreement with everyone. So if you don't have this information, or the contractor can't provide any of that to you to document that someone is in an approved program, they will be required to pay the full journeyman's rate to that individual. And those are really no way around that. They would have to pay the full amount. And they can't just say that they're going to be in the program, or we're enrolling them in the program or on the job training, because that's not the same thing as being in an approved DOL apprenticeship program. Okay, just kind of follow up on some payroll report where there are some problems that occur regularly. The contractors fail to complete all the required information or include all the information in that on that first page. A lot of times they will leave off identifier numbers. They should all have some form of employee ID, and so it's important to have that information on the report. The classification may be missing. Either they leave it off altogether, which then you're kind of guessing whether or not, based on what the contract is for, or the contractor who's working. You might know the type of work they're doing, but you want to make sure that they provide you that classification, for the work that's being done. Along with that, the group letter, sometimes they'll leave off. Some of the classifications have different groups depending on the duties being performed. And so if those group letters are missing, again, you're guessing about what actual work they're doing and trying to guess whether the rate that's being paid that they list is correct, because you could have 3 different groups of laborers, and not know exactly what that individual is doing. So putting the classification and the group letter on is important, and something that the contractor should be doing. As I mentioned before, listing the overtime or the standard hours in the overtime column, just throws up a red flag that we've got a bunch of overtime hours when they're actually standard straight time hours. And so just a reminder to the contractors to look at that, or the people filling those reports out, that they're putting those hours in the correct row when they're doing that. Other things that may be missing, the deductions are listed, but then there's nothing from the employees that are authorizing those deductions. So we want to make sure that that's included. And so if you see deductions on that first page in that column and haven't received anything from the contractor, we'll reach out to them to make sure that they get that information to you as soon as possible. On the statement of compliance, contractors, again, failing to provide all the required information. The block 1 information about the project, the work time or the work week, where the project is. Sometimes they forget to fill that out, which may not seem like a big deal, but there's really not a lot to those reports, and the information is fairly easy to complete. So just a reminder that they're filling these out completely and not just leaving things blank. Sometimes the block 4, sub-block 4 of, or the sub-block of number 4 regarding fringe benefit payments, either they're not checking that at all, or they're checking the wrong one, depending on how those fringe benefits are being paid. So most of the time, the ones I see are they just haven't checked anything, and so then you have to guess what they're doing. They're saying they pay fringe benefits. If they are paying fringe benefits into plans, or however they're doing the fringe benefits, it's always good to have a list of those fringe benefits and how much they are per hour, so that you can go back and look at all the fringe benefits provided and calculate that the total amount they're being paid in fringe benefits plus their hourly rate of pay meets that total combined rate on the wage determination. Sometimes they're missing the signature. Sometimes they're not signed, or it's not an original signature. As I mentioned, they have to provide you, the grant recipient has to be able to keep or maintain original signed payroll reports. If we ask for any documentation or copies, that's certainly fine to copy and send us stuff when we need that. But the actual project files would have to have payroll reports with original signatures, and that includes any corrected payroll reports that they may have to submit, restitution payroll reports. All of those must have original signatures. The last item there is just the payroll clerk, or again someone else from the company signing the statement of compliance, but there's no authorization from the company owner or officers to indicate that that individual is allowed to sign the payroll report. These 2 items are just a couple of things that you want to look for when you're looking at additional classifications, and the all agency memorandum 213, just as a kind of a detailed explanation of the process that DOL uses to add classifications and rates. Have copies of that or access to those on the DOL website if you're interested in that. Another all agency memorandum number 214 went into effect the same time back in March of 2013, where certain types of survey work are now considered subject to the Davis-Bacon requirements. And so if we do have a case of that, or you think there might be surveying going on during construction, or it's being done with part of the contractor's crew or employees, those could be covered activities. And if that's the case, we would have to send that into the Department of Labor as a additional classification, just like we would do with any other classification request, and have them go through that process to determine whether or not it is covered, or based on the work that they're providing or doing, that it would not be a covered activity. So if you do have surveying on the project during the course of the construction, it's something to keep in mind so that we can get that added if we need to. All right, almost ready to wrap up here, but just a list of the resources again to let you know what's out there, where you can get information if you have questions about anything. The management guide, of course, on our website, and contains all the information related to the labor standards presentations, all the other information related to all of our program compliance areas, all the federal laws that apply to CDBG. So if you have questions, it's a good document to look through and provides a lot of information. And then if you aren't able to find anything and have questions, certainly give us a call related to the labor compliance, especially. Let me know, and we can talk through those things. The other items, the contractor's guide is the document provided usually when approval of wage determination is given. I send a PDF document of that, just the layman's terms for contractors to kind of help explain, or a little easier to understand than the actual federal guidelines for compliance. So we have that available as a resource. The resource from HUD, the Federal Labor Standards Requirements in Housing and Urban Development Programs, the 1344.1 document is available. What I use again for a lot of citations and reference when we have questions come up. The link there provided will get you to that document as well. And then the Wage Determinations Online website listed is the website to go to for getting the wage determination, downloading that from that system so that you can then copy it and upload it into Iowa Grants when you make your request, and be able to provide a copy to the engineers and architects as they're getting ready to prepare the bid documents. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. My contact information is here, and anytime you have questions, please give me a call or reach out to me through email. Either way, I would be glad to talk with you and answer any questions you might have. And with that, I will end the session, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen in. Thanks.